The year was 2387, and the great space station called Nexus Prime floated like a jewel among the stars. Inside its massive halls, representatives from 12 different alien species gathered for the most important meeting in galactic history. Dr. Emma Clark, a human scientist with tired eyes and graying hair, stood nervously outside the Grand Council chamber, clutching a data pad that contained information that could change everything. Emma had spent the last 6 months studying strange readings from the edge of their galaxy. Her research ship, the Horizon, had detected something terrible approaching from the darkness between galaxies. The energy signatures matched ancient records of creatures called the Devourers, cosmic monsters that had destroyed entire star systems and distant galaxies long ago. "Are you ready for this, Emma?" asked Captain James Reynolds, the commander of her research vessel. James was a kind man in his 50s, with weathered hands and gentle eyes that had seen too much of space. He stood beside her, wearing his best uniform for the council meeting. Emma nodded, though her hands shook slightly. "The data is clear, James. Something is coming, and it's bigger than anything we've ever faced." The doors to the council chamber opened with a soft hiss, and Emma walked into a room that took her breath away. The chamber was enormous, with walls made of crystal that showed the stars beyond. Around a circular table sat beings that looked like living light, others that appeared to be made of pure crystal, and creatures that seemed to exist as clouds of glowing particles. At the head of the table sat Thyron, the council leader. He was a being of pure energy, tall and bright, who spoke in a voice that sounded like music. The other species respected him greatly, though Emma had always found him cold and distant toward humans. "Dr. Clark," Thyron said, his form flickering slightly, "you have requested this emergency session. Please present your findings to the council." Emma stepped forward and activated her data pad. Images filled the air above the table, showing the readings her instruments had detected. "Council members, we have discovered massive energy signatures approaching our galaxy from beyond the cosmic void. These signatures match historical records of the Devourers." A sound like wind chimes came from the Zephyrian representative, a being made of living crystal. In the human translation device, this became words: "The Devourers are legends, human stories told to frighten children." The collective, a group mind that spoke through multiple bodies, responded in unison: "Human paranoia. Your species sees danger where none exists. You have been members of our alliance for only 50 years. You do not understand the cosmos as we do." Emma felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she pressed on. "With respect, the quantum readings are unmistakable. These entities consume stellar energy directly from stars. If they reach our galaxy, they will destroy everything." Admiral William Hayes, Earth's military representative, stepped forward. He was a tall man with silver hair and a stern face marked by years of command. "Dr. Clark's research has never been wrong. Her team discovered the quantum drives that revolutionized our space travel. Her work on stellar mechanics helped establish 3 new colonies. I believe we should listen to her warnings." The alien representatives exchanged what passed for glances among their species. Some flickered their lights, others hummed in frequencies that humans could barely hear. Emma realized they were communicating in ways her species could not fully understand, discussing her findings in their ancient languages. Thyron's energy form pulsed brighter. "Dr. Clark, humanity is the youngest species in our alliance. You have been traveling between stars for less than a century, while some of us have explored the cosmos for millions of years. What you interpret as a threat may simply be natural phenomena that you do not yet understand." The crystalline Zephyrian chimed again. "The human tendency toward fear and aggression is well documented. Perhaps Dr. Clark sees threats because her species expects them." Emma felt anger building in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "I am not motivated by fear but by scientific evidence. The energy patterns are consistent across 17 different sensor arrays. The approach vector suggests intelligence and purpose. These are not natural phenomena." A member of the Luminari, beings of living light who rarely spoke, finally addressed the council. "Even if these Devourers exist, they are still far from our space. The outer rim of the galaxy is vast. We have time to study the situation further." Admiral Hayes crossed his arms. "Time we may not have if Dr. Clark is correct. The Concordat was founded on the promise of stars, the sacred pact that no member species would abandon another in times of crisis. Surely this qualifies as such a time. The promise of stars was the most important agreement in galactic history. Carved into the walls of this very chamber in the languages of all 12 species, it stated clearly that the Alliance would stand together against any existential threat. It was the foundation of their peaceful civilization. Thyron's form dimmed slightly, a sign Emma had learned indicated deep thought. The promise of stars is sacred to us all. But we cannot waste resources on hypothetical threats based on incomplete data. The vote was called, and Emma watched in growing horror as species after species chose to dismiss her warnings. The crystalline beings chimed their rejection. The hive minds buzzed their refusal. The energy creatures flickered their denial. The matter is closed, Thyron announced with finality. Dr. Clark, your concerns are noted, but the Concordat has more immediate issues to address. Perhaps in time, your species will learn to distinguish between genuine threats and cosmic background noise. Emma left the chamber with Admiral Hayes, her heart heavy with dread. Outside in the corridor, James Reynolds waited for them with a grim expression. They didn't believe you, he said quietly. Emma shook her head, looking back at the closed doors of the council chamber. They think we're too young, too primitive to understand the cosmos. But I know what I detected out there. Something terrible is coming, and when it arrives, humanity may have to face it alone. Admiral Hayes placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Then we'd better start preparing. Because if you're right, the promise of stars may not be worth the crystal it's carved on. 6 months had passed since the council meeting, and Communications Officer Lucy Webb sat at her station aboard Earth's Orbital Command Center, watching the deep space communication grid with growing concern. The young woman had been monitoring interstellar messages for 3 years, but she had never seen anything like what was happening now. Admiral Hayes, we have a problem, she called across the command center, her voice tight with worry. The silver-haired admiral walked over to her station, his weathered face showing the stress of recent weeks. What is it, Lucy? New Haven Colony has gone completely silent. No daily reports, no emergency signals, nothing. They just stopped transmitting 12 hours ago. Lucy's fingers moved quickly across her controls, bringing up a star map dotted with red warning lights. And it's not just New Haven. We've lost contact with 17 Outer Rim colonies in the past week. Admiral Hayes studied the tactical display, watching as more red markers appeared on the galaxy's edge like a spreading disease. Each red light represented thousands of human lives, entire worlds that had simply vanished from the communication network. Any distress signals before they went dark? He asked. That's the strange part, sir. No distress calls, no battle reports, no evacuation orders. They just stopped. Lucy pulled up the last transmission from New Haven, recorded just hours before the silence began. The final message was routine weather reports, crop yields, everything normal. 3 days later, the automated monitoring stations at the galaxy's edge began sending their own terrifying reports. These unmanned platforms, built to watch for natural disasters and space phenomena, detected massive gravitational anomalies moving through space in perfect formation. The readings showed objects the size of small moons, but moving with purpose and intelligence. Dr. Emma Clark worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the research ship Horizon, now stationed at the very edge of human space. Her assistant, Dr. Robert Mitchell, stood beside her as they analyzed the incoming data from the monitoring stations. Emma, look at these energy readings, Robert said, his voice filled with disbelief. The gravitational signatures are moving from system to system, but each system afterward shows no stellar activity at all. Emma studied the data on her screens, her worst fears coming true. They're not just attacking the planets, Robert. They're consuming the stars themselves. Look at the Beta Centauri system. The star's energy output dropped to 0 over the course of 6 hours. That's impossible. Stars don't just die like that. They do if something is feeding on them. Emma brought up a comparison chart showing normal stellar activity versus the dead systems behind the gravitational anomalies. Whatever these things are, they drain stars completely, leaving nothing but cold, dark husks. The first major alien world to fall was Crystal Prime, the beautiful homeworld of the Zephyrians. The crystalline beings had built their civilization around their star's unique energy patterns, creating cities that sang with stellar harmonies. When their sun began to dim, the Zephyrians sent desperate messages across the galaxy. "Help us!" came their chiming voices through the quantum communication network. "Our star is dying. Something vast and terrible feeds upon it." The Zephyrian defense fleet, with their advanced crystal ships and energy weapons, engaged the creature consuming their sun. The battle lasted less than an hour. The Zephyrian weapons, capable of shattering planets, barely scratched the cosmic entity. The thing adapted to each attack, learning and evolving with frightening speed. Crystal Prime went silent just like the human colonies, but this time, the entire Concordat watched it happen. Captain David Turner commanded the human destroyer Defiance, positioned at the edge of Zephyrian space to provide assistance. He watched through his ship's sensors as the massive entity finished consuming the Zephyrian sun, leaving behind only darkness and dead worlds. "Communications, get me Admiral Hayes immediately," he ordered his crew. "Tell him the Devourers are real, and they're exactly what Dr. Clark warned us about." The emergency session of the Concordat Council was chaos unlike anything in the Alliance's peaceful history. Representatives flickered, hummed, and buzzed in their native languages as they watched recordings of Crystal Prime's destruction. The calm dignity of previous meetings was gone, replaced by raw fear. "The creatures are moving inward through the galaxy," reported Thyron, his energy form pulsing with instability. "Our most advanced weapons are useless against them. They adapt to every attack method within minutes." The collective spoke in their unified voice, but now their words carried panic. Analysis complete. Entities consume stellar energy directly. Technological adaptation rate exceeds all known parameters. Survival probability decreases with each encounter. Admiral Hayes stood before the assembled aliens, his human uniform looking simple among the exotic forms around him. "Dr. Clark tried to warn you 6 months ago. You dismissed her findings as human paranoia. Now 17 human worlds and the Zephyrian homeworld are gone. What do you suggest we do?" asked the Luminary representative, their light form dimming with fear. "We fight," Hayes replied simply. "We stand together and find a way to stop these things." But the alien representatives were already looking toward the galactic core, calculating distances and defensive positions. One by one they began to speak of retreat, of abandoning the outer galaxy to save their core worlds. "Strategic withdrawal," Thyron announced, using words that made Admiral Hayes's blood run cold. "We must preserve the heart of our civilization. The outer colonies are acceptable losses." "What about the humans still fighting out there?" Hayes demanded. "What about the promise of stars?" The crystalline being who had replaced the destroyed Zephyrian representative chimed coldly. "The promise was made in times of peace. These are not ordinary circumstances. Survival must take precedence over sentiment." Hayes watched in growing horror as the vote was called. Species after species chose to abandon the outer galaxy and retreat to their core worlds. The promise of stars, carved into the very walls around them, was being broken by the beings who had created it. When the session ended, Admiral Hayes found himself alone with the weight of terrible knowledge. The great alien fleets were already beginning their retreat toward the galactic core, leaving humanity to face the cosmic darkness alone. "So much for 50 years of alliance," he said quietly to himself, watching through the chamber windows as Concordat ships prepared to flee. The Devourers continued their methodical advance through the outer rim, consuming star after star. And now humanity stood as the only barrier between these cosmic horrors and the heart of galactic civilization. Captain David Turner stood on the bridge of his destroyer Defiance, watching the last of the alien fleets disappear into hyperspace. The great Zephyrian crystal ships, the energy vessels of the Luminari, the bioships of the Collective, all of them fleeing toward the safety of the galactic core while humanity faced extinction alone. "They actually left us," said Lieutenant Michael Parker, Turner's young communications officer. His voice carried disbelief and anger. 50 years of alliance and they just abandoned us when we needed them most. Turner's jaw tightened as he watched the tactical display. Red markers showed Devourer positions advancing steadily through human space, consuming star after star. Each marker represented entire solar systems dying, billions of lives lost to cosmic hunger. "All ships, this is Admiral Hayes," came the voice over the fleet communication system. Turner could hear the weight of command and loss in the older man's words. "The Concordat has broken their sacred promise, but we have not broken ours. Earth Command is implementing Operation Last Stand. We will not retreat. We will not surrender. We will hold the line." 300 human ships hung in space around Turner's destroyer, everything from massive battleships to converted mining vessels. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, but against cosmic entities the size of moons, it seemed pitifully small. Dr. Emma Clark's voice crackled through the quantum communication system from her laboratory on the research station Europa. She had been working without sleep for days, studying the remains of destroyed Devourer feeding equipment that human ships had managed to retrieve. "Admiral Hayes, I found something," she said, excitement breaking through her exhaustion. "The Devourers have a weakness. During their feeding process, when they're actively consuming stellar material, their quantum shields fluctuate. There's a window of vulnerability that lasts approximately 4 minutes." Captain Richard Stone, commanding the massive battleship Courage, responded over the fleet channel. 4 minutes to attack something the size of a small moon? What can we possibly do in that time? We go inside, Emma replied, her words sending shockwaves through the fleet. Into the stars themselves. I've been working on modifications to our quantum drives. In theory, they could survive inside stellar coronas long enough to reach the devourers during feeding. Turner felt his blood run cold. Flying into a star was suicide. The temperatures would melt their ships in seconds, the radiation would cook them alive, and the gravitational forces would tear them apart like paper dolls. The math works, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. The quantum drives create a protective field that can withstand stellar conditions for short periods. But it would have to be a volunteer mission. The survival rate would be less than 10%. The fleet communication channel went silent for long moments as hundreds of human commanders processed what they had just heard. They were being asked to fly their ships directly into the heart of dying stars to fight cosmic monsters. Captain Mary Phillips was the first to respond. She commanded a squadron of light cruisers called Phoenix Wing, fast ships designed for reconnaissance. Phoenix leader volunteers for the first test run. If we're going to die anyway, we might as well make it count. The test came at the Tau Ceti system, where a massive devourer had begun consuming the orange star. Phillips led 12 ships toward the stellar inferno while the rest of the fleet watched from a safe distance. All ships, this is Phoenix leader, Phillips transmitted as her squadron approached the star's outer atmosphere. Remember, we're not just fighting for humanity. We're fighting for every species in this galaxy, even the ones who abandoned us. Turner watched on his tactical display as the Phoenix squadron entered the star's corona. The readings were horrifying: temperatures of millions of degrees, radiation levels that would kill an unprotected human in microseconds, magnetic fields strong enough to tear apart asteroids. 8 ships were destroyed instantly, their quantum drives overloading in the impossible conditions. 3 more suffered catastrophic failures as they pushed deeper into the stellar fire. Only Phillips and her ship Phoenix made it through the inferno to reach the devourer's feeding apparatus. "This is for my daughter Sarah," Phillips said calmly over the communication system. "Tell her mommy fought the monsters and won." The quantum torpedoes Phillips fired were designed for ship-to-ship combat, but inside the devourer's feeding mechanism, they created a chain reaction that lit up the entire system. The massive cosmic entity screamed, a sound that registered across multiple dimensions and reached the ears of every species in the galaxy. For the first time since the war began, a devourer retreated, wounded and confused by the attack from inside the star it was consuming. The news spread through the fleeing Concordat fleets like wildfire. Impossible recordings showed human ships diving into stellar fire and actually damaging the cosmic horrors that their advanced weapons could not touch. "How is this possible?" asked Thyron during an emergency council session aboard a Concordat command ship. His energy form flickered with confusion. Primitive human technology succeeding where our quantum cannons failed? The collective buzzed with analysis: human ships inferior to Concordat designs. Human weapons centuries behind our capabilities. Logic suggests mission impossible, yet evidence contradicts analysis. But they dismissed it as a desperate fluke, the death throes of a doomed species. The alien fleets continued their retreat to the safety of the galactic core, convinced that humanity would be extinct within months. Turner, now promoted to admiral after Hayes died defending the Sol system, was already planning the next attack. Humanity had found a way to hurt these cosmic monsters, and they would press their advantage no matter the cost. "All ships," he broadcast to the remaining human fleet, now reduced to 200 vessels. "We've proven these things can be killed. We're going to teach them what happens when you threaten Earth." Word spread through human space like lightning. Every colony, every outpost, every mining station heard the same message: Earth would not surrender. Humanity would not flee. They would stand and fight, even if it meant flying into the hearts of dying stars. The Devourers had awakened something in humanity that the comfortable, technologically superior aliens had forgotten existed: the willingness to die on their feet rather than live on their knees. The war had raged for 8 months and humanity was bleeding to death one star system at a time. Commander Susan Blake stood on the bridge of the carrier Endurance, watching through the viewing port as another transport ship prepared for its final mission. The ship was called New Hope, and it carried 3,000 volunteers, farmers from the agricultural world of Harmony, teachers from the education centers of New Athens, engineers who had built the great orbital stations around Earth. All of them had made the same terrible choice: to die fighting rather than live running. "This is Captain Thompson aboard New Hope," came the voice over the communication system. Thompson had been a cargo hauler before the war, moving supplies between colonies. Now his converted transport ship carried enough fusion explosives to crack a small moon. Tell our families we chose this. Tell them we chose to stand and fight when the whole galaxy gave up on us. Blake closed her eyes as she watched the New Hope accelerate toward the massive devourer feeding near Vega. The cosmic entity was the size of a city, its dark form wrapped around the dying star like a parasite. The transport ship looked like a tiny insect flying toward a giant spider. The explosion, when it came, lit up the entire system. The New Hope detonated its cargo inside the devourer's feeding mechanism, and for the second time in the war, one of the cosmic monsters screamed and retreated into deep space. But the cost was becoming unbearable. 3,000 more human lives lost, bringing the total casualties to over 4 billion people. Earth's population had dropped from 12 billion to 8 billion, and the numbers kept falling with each desperate battle. Dr. Emma Clark worked in her laboratory on Europa, Jupiter's ice moon that had been converted into humanity's primary research facility. She looked older than her 50 years, her hair now completely gray from months of stress and sleepless nights. Her assistant, Dr. Robert Mitchell, brought her another cup of coffee and the latest analysis reports. "Emma, you need to see this," he said, setting down data tablets filled with readings from their successful attacks. "I've been studying the remains we've recovered from the devourer feeding systems. They're not biological at all." Emma looked up from her work, her tired eyes focusing on the information. "What do you mean?" "They're machines, Emma. Incredibly advanced but still artificial constructs. And look at this." Robert showed her a series of quantum signatures that had been decoded from the wreckage. "There are programming elements, decision trees, operational parameters. Someone built these things." Emma studied the data, her scientific mind racing. "But who? And why send them to destroy entire galaxies?" "I think they're testing us," Robert said quietly. "Looking for something specific. The programming suggests they're searching for civilizations that meet certain criteria. Meanwhile, throughout human space, entire worlds were making the ultimate sacrifice. The agricultural planet Demeter, which had fed half of humanity's outer colonies, voted to evacuate its 4 million residents to orbital habitats. The planet itself was then converted into a weapon. Mayor Patricia Wells had been the leader of Demeter's capital city for 15 years. She stood in the empty streets where children had once played, where families had once lived peaceful lives. Now the buildings were rigged with fusion charges, and the planet's core had been modified to create a massive kinetic weapon. "This is Demeter Control," she broadcast to the human fleet as a devourer approached their system. "We are ready to serve humanity one last time. Tell them we grew more than food here, we grew courage." When the devourer entered Demeter's gravity well to begin feeding on the system's star, the planet was launched like a bullet into the cosmic entity's path. The collision was visible from 3 star systems away, and another devourer was wounded and driven off. But Demeter was gone forever, along with the farms that had sustained human civilization. From the safety of the galactic core, the Concordat species watched humanity's desperate war with cold calculation. They had established new defensive lines around their most precious worlds, confident that their advanced technology and strong defenses would protect them. "The humans fight with admirable courage," Thyron admitted during a private council session aboard the Concordat command ship. His energy form pulsed with what might have been respect. "But courage cannot overcome cosmic forces. They merely delay the inevitable." The crystalline replacement for the destroyed Zephyrian Council member chimed thoughtfully. "Perhaps their sacrifice serves a purpose. When the devourers finish consuming human space, they may be weakened enough for our weapons to be truly effective." The collective buzzed in agreement. Human resistance provides valuable data. Their tactics and casualties will inform our own defensive strategies. Their deaths serve the greater good. They were already planning how to reclaim the outer galaxy after humanity's extinction, never imagining that the species they had abandoned might actually find a way to win. In human space, Admiral Turner commanded the remaining fleet from his flagship Retribution. They had fewer than 400 ships left from the thousands they had started with, but every surviving vessel was crewed by volunteers who had already accepted death as the price of defiance. "Admiral," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Sarah Davis, "we're receiving requests from civilian ships asking to join combat operations. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, even private yachts. They all want to be converted for attack missions." Turner looked at the list of volunteer ships, ordinary people with ordinary jobs who were willing to die to protect their species and their galaxy. "Accept them all. If we're going to make our final stand, we'll do it with every human who's willing to fight." Dr. Clark made another breakthrough in her research, discovering that the devourers could be communicated with during their vulnerable feeding phases. But the language was mathematical, based on quantum mechanics and stellar engineering that pushed human science to its absolute limits. "They're not just destroying us, Robert," she told her assistant as she worked on the translation algorithms. "They're evaluating us, looking for proof that we're strong enough to survive something even worse that's coming from beyond our galaxy." Humanity had passed every test so far, but the final examination was approaching fast. The final battle began when humanity's long-range sensors detected the largest devourer anyone had ever seen approaching the Sol system. The prime devourer was 3 times the size of Earth's moon, its dark form rippling with energies that bent space itself. It moved with terrible purpose directly toward Earth's sun, ignoring the smaller human colonies as if they were beneath its notice. Admiral Turner stood on the bridge of his flagship Retribution, surrounded by the remnants of humanity's once great fleet. 200 ships hung in space between Earth and the approaching cosmic monster, converted cargo haulers, battered military vessels, and civilian ships that had volunteered for humanity's last stand. "All ships, this is Admiral Turner," he broadcast across the fleet communication system. His voice was calm despite the magnitude of what they faced. "Today we make our final stand. Our families are in the shelters below. Our species depends on what we do in the next few hours. If we fail, at least the galaxy will remember that humanity looked into the cosmic dark and refused to blink." Dr. Emma Clark worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the command ship, making final adjustments to the most desperate plan in human history. Her hair was completely white now, and her hands shook from exhaustion, but her mind remained sharp as she calibrated the quantum field generators. "Admiral," she called across the bridge, "I need you to position the fleet exactly between Earth and the Sun. We're going to turn Sol itself into a weapon." The plan was insanity made real. Emma had discovered a way to trigger a controlled stellar flare while the human fleet, equipped with experimental quantum shields developed during months of desperate war, would ride the stellar wind like ancient surfers riding ocean waves. They would surf the fire of their own star directly into the prime devourer's feeding mechanism. Captain Jennifer Walsh commanded the lead assault squadron, 12 ships that would spearhead the attack. She had lost her husband in the battle for New Geneva and her brother in the defense of Tau Ceti. Now she prepared to join them. "Fleet Command, this is Wolfpack Leader," she transmitted as her squadron moved into position. "All pilots ready for stellar surfing. It's been an honor serving with the bravest people in the galaxy." Behind them, Earth's population of 4 billion people huddled in deep underground shelters, listening to radio broadcasts of the battle above. Children who had never known peace pressed close to their parents. Old people who remembered the early days of space flight whispered prayers to whatever god still listened. The sun began to destabilize as Emma's quantum field generators activated. Solar flares danced across the star's surface like deadly aurora, building toward the massive eruption that would either save humanity or destroy their home system entirely. 60 seconds to solar flare initiation, Emma announced. "All ships, quantum shields to maximum power. Remember, we only get one chance at this." The prime devourer had begun feeding on Sol, its massive form extending tendrils of dark energy into the star's corona. It seemed unaware of the tiny human ships positioning themselves for attack, dismissing them as it had dismissed all the other primitive species it had tested over the eons. 30 seconds, Emma counted down. "Fleet, prepare for stellar wind contact." Captain Walsh checked her ship's systems one final time. The quantum shields were holding, but they had never been tested under these conditions. The temperature readings were already climbing beyond what their instruments could measure. 10 seconds. "All ships, this is for everyone who believed in us when the rest of the galaxy gave up. This is for the promise of stars that we kept when others broke theirs." The sun erupted in a directed fury that lit up half the solar system. A massive solar flare, guided by Emma's quantum field generators, raced outward from Sol's surface carrying enough energy to power human civilization for 1,000 years. The human fleet caught the stellar wind like sailors catching a hurricane. Ships that should have been vaporized instantly rode the plasma storm toward their target, their quantum shields holding for precious seconds that felt like hours. Admiral Turner's final words echoed across all human communication frequencies as his ship entered the prime devourer's feeding mechanism. "For those we've lost. For those who fled. For those who kept their promises when the stars themselves seemed to abandon hope." The combined explosion of 200 fusion reactors detonating inside the prime devourer's core created a quantum cascade that was visible from the galactic core. The massive entity, faced with beings willing to weaponize their own star and die in its nuclear fire rather than submit, experienced something it had not encountered in millions of years of testing: recognition. These creatures possessed the one quality the ancient builders had programmed it to seek: the willingness to sacrifice everything for something greater than themselves. The Prime Devourer sent a quantum signal across space to its fellow constructs: test complete. Species evaluation: suitable for survival. Withdrawal authorized. One by one, the cosmic entities throughout the galaxy ceased their feeding and began their long journey back to the space between galaxies. Their purpose was fulfilled. They had found a civilization with the strength to face what was coming from the depths of intergalactic space. 3 months later, the surviving Concordat species emerged from their hiding places in the galactic core to survey the damage. They expected to find a galaxy picked clean, with human space nothing but dead systems and floating wreckage. Instead, they found human relief ships already working to restore the abandoned colonies. Engineering crews from Earth worked alongside the few aliens who had chosen to stay and fight, rebuilding communication networks and restoring life support systems to worlds their former allies had fled. Admiral Susan Blake, now the senior surviving human military officer, addressed the reformed Concordat Council. The meeting was held aboard a human ship, since Nexus Prime had been abandoned during the retreat. "You broke your promise to us when we needed you most," she said quietly, her words carrying across the galaxy through quantum broadcasts. "The promise of stars meant nothing when darkness came calling. But we kept our promise, not just to protect our own worlds, but to defend this entire galaxy, including the systems you abandoned." The alien representatives shifted uncomfortably in their environmental suits. The proud Thyron's energy form had dimmed with what humans recognized as shame. The crystalline beings no longer chimed with arrogance. "Humanity will remain part of the Concordat," Admiral Blake continued. "But the promise of stars will be rewritten. This time with words that mean something. This time, when we give our word to stand together, we'll honor it even if it costs us everything." In the months that followed, humanity emerged as the moral leaders of galactic civilization, not through conquest or threats, but through the authority earned by standing firm when hope itself seemed lost. The new promise of stars was carved in human script alongside the alien languages: "When darkness comes, we stand together. When others fall, we remain. When the universe itself turns against us, we keep our word."